the Elizabethan curriculum. A Classical Education for the Modern Man, Lecture 24, Shakespeare's Coriolanus, the man who could not perform himself. Coriolanus is the play that makes audiences uncomfortable and scholars excited, which is a reliable indicator that it is doing something that matters. It was written probably around 1608, a year or two after Antony and Cleopatra, and it is in almost every respect the opposite of that play. Antony and Cleopatra is excessive, oceanic, full of the most extravagant poetry in the canon. Coriolanus is spare, hard, deliberately unglamorous. Where Antony and Cleopatra invites the audience to love its protagonists even as they destroy themselves, Coriolanus keeps the audience at a deliberate distance from a protagonist who is, in many respects, unlovable and who would find the audience's love contemptible if he knew about it. Where Antony and Cleopatra is about the infinite, Coriolanus is about the absolute. And the absolute, the play demonstrates with merciless consistency, is incompatible with political life. Shakespeare takes his material from Plutarch's Life of Coriolanus, which we discussed in Lecture 18, and again follows the source with remarkable fidelity. The additions he makes are revealing precisely because they are so few and so targeted. He expands the role of the Roman citizens, giving them a voice and a complexity that Plutarch's account does not quite provide. He develops the relationship between Coriolanus and his mother Volumnia into the psychological center of the play, and he adds the tribunes Ciceronian and Brutus as fully realized political operators whose manipulation of the democratic process is presented with a clarity that has made the play politically controversial in every subsequent century. Caius Marcius Coriolanus is the finest soldier in Rome, and he knows it, and he cannot pretend otherwise, which is his entire problem. In a political culture that requires the performance of humility, the ritual solicitation of the people's vote, the careful management of public impression, Coriolanus is constitutionally incapable of performance. He is not humble, and he will not pretend to be. He does not respect the judgment of the common people, and he will not pretend to. He believes that military excellence is the only form of virtue that matters, and that the extension of political rights to people who have not demonstrated military excellence is an error that will destroy the state, and he says so repeatedly in public with the directness of a man who believes that truth is a sufficient justification for any statement regardless of its consequences. This is not stupidity. It is a particular kind of integrity that has become indistinguishable from a particular kind of madness. Coriolanus understands exactly what the political situation requires. He simply refuses to provide it. When the tribunes and the citizens demand that he show his wounds and ask for the people's vote, the custom that Roman tradition requires of candidates for the consulship, Coriolanus first agrees and then cannot sustain the performance. He begins the ritual correctly, and then his contempt for the ritual overtakes him, and he starts to speak in his own voice. The crucial scene is the one in which he stands in the forum in the gown of humility, the traditional garment worn by candidates soliciting votes, and attempts to ask citizens for their support. He asks each citizen in turn with a sarcasm that is so thin, it is barely a pretense at all. What he is doing is mocking the ritual while performing it, which satisfies neither the requirement of the ritual nor his own integrity, which would prefer to refuse the ritual entirely. He is caught between what the political system demands and what his character can provide. And the gap between them is precisely where the tribunes insert the lever that destroys him. Ciceronian and Brutus, the tribunes, are the most purely political characters in Shakespeare, which is to say, they are the characters most purely motivated by the requirements of their institutional position rather than by any personal virtue or vice. They are not villains in any simple sense. They are doing their job, which is to represent the interests of the plebeians against the patrician class of which Coriolanus is the most extreme representative. Their manipulation of the citizens' assembly, their exploitation of Coriolanus's inevitable intemperate outburst to achieve his banishment is politically effective and personally dishonest and institutionally correct all at the same time, which is what political operation at the highest level usually looks like. The banishment scene is the dramatic and psychological fulcrum of the play. Coriolanus, expelled by the city he has served and the people he despises, turns at the gate and delivers what is probably the most extraordinary act of rhetorical reversal in Shakespeare. "You banish me," he says to the assembled citizens. "I banish you." He strips them of the power to exile him by insisting that the exile is his choice, his act, his assertion, rather than their imposition. It is magnificent, and it is also completely insane from a practical political standpoint, and the audience is simultaneously thrilled by it and aware that the man performing it has just destroyed any possibility of return. Goes to the Volscians, offers himself to Aufidius, his great enemy, the man he has fought and defeated repeatedly over a military career of 30 years. The offer itself is a remarkable speech. "Here am I," he says. "If you have a mind to wreak your hatred on me, now is the time. If not, then use me." And Aufidius, who is also a soldier and who understands what stands before him, embraces him. "The enemy who will use you is more valuable than the city that has rejected you." It is a cold calculation on both sides, dressed as a moment of almost erotic intensity, which is entirely in keeping with the relationship that the play has been presenting as the most genuine connection in Coriolanus's emotional life. His wife and child are obligations. His mother is his maker and his jailer. Aufidius is his equal, his mirror, the only person in the play who meets him at the level of pure martial identity. The Volscian campaign against Rome proceeds to the walls of the city, and then Volumnia come. We discussed in the Plutarch lecture what Volumnia says and what it means. In Shakespeare, she has a full scene, one of the longest and most sustained pieces of dramatic rhetoric in the entire canon, a speech that moves through argument and appeal and shame and love and threat with the tactical intelligence of a general deploying every resource simultaneously. She has made him what he is by making him believe that military honor was the only honor that mattered, by suppressing in him from childhood every impulse toward flexibility and compromise and the performance of self that political life requires. And now she is asking him to betray everything she made him to be in order to save the city that made her. He is silent for a long moment. Shakespeare gives him the most powerful stage direction in the canon. He holds her hand, silent. The silence is longer than any speech could be. He knows what it means. He knows what he is about to do. Knows what it will cost him. He speaks. He says he will make a peace, and calls it a happy victory for Rome, and says of himself that he is most fortunate if he is not most happy. The unhappiness is the knowledge that the Volscians will kill him for the peace he has just agreed to, and that his mother has sent him to his death with the same hands that shaped him for glory. Aufidius kills him. Of course he does. A Volscian general, who has just been deprived of his victory by his Roman ally's sentimental capitulation to his mother, has no further use for that ally and every political reason to remove him. The killing is done with the particular efficiency of a man who is genuinely angry and also making a rational political calculation, which again is what political violence at the highest level usually looks like. His last speech, beginning "Cut me to pieces," Volses, men and lads, is pure defiance, the man who has been stripped of everything else, asserting the only thing that cannot be taken from him, which is the record of what he was in the field. Like an eagle in a dovecot, he says, "I fluttered your Volscians in Corioli. Alone I did it." The boast is childish and magnificent and true, and it gets him killed. And the audience that has been kept at a distance from this man throughout the play finds at this moment that the distance has collapsed, and that the death of someone they were not quite sure they liked has hit them harder than they expected. This is Shakespeare's most precise manipulation of audience response in the Roman plays. He withholds sympathy strategically throughout and then releases it at the exact moment when it can do the most damage. The audience that has been frustrated by Coriolanus's rigidity and contempt finds, at the moment of his death, that they have been judging him by the wrong standard all along. He was not playing the game. They thought they were watching. He was playing a different game, one whose rules he set himself, and he played it with absolute consistency from first to last. And it killed him, and it was worth it, and the play does not apologize for any of this. Quote, Aufidius speaks the last lines, quote, "He calls Coriolanus a noble memory and says he shall have a noble memory." It is considerably less than Antony's eulogy over Brutus. It is also honest in a way that Antony's eulogy was not quite required to be. A noble memory is what the man who cannot compromise leaves behind. Not a city saved, not an empire built, not a republic restored. A memory. Uncompromising and therefore unassimilable, the thing that the political world produces when it encounters a virtue it cannot domesticate. The three Roman plays together, Julius Caesar, Antony and Cleopatra, Coriolanus, constitute the greatest sustained engagement with Roman material in the English language, And they constituted precisely because Shakespeare had the education that allowed him to read Plutarch from the inside, to feel the biographical material as a dramatist rather than merely to understand it as a scholar. The cold room in Stratford, the Latin grammar, the years of construing and disputing and absorbing produced in this particular instance a mind that could take the greatest biographical writing of the ancient world and transform it into the greatest drama of the modern world. The transmission was complete. The education had done what it was designed to do. In our final lecture, we gather up everything the course has built, from the grammar school to Terence, to Cicero, to Virgil, to Ovid, to Plutarch, to the Elizabethan moment, and the plays it produced, and ask what it all amounts to, and what it means that we are here 2,000 years after the events and 400 years after the education, still reading these texts and finding in them something we cannot find anywhere else. End of lecture 24.